This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
I'd like to call the Tuesday, December 22nd, 2020 North Haven Fire Commission meeting to order. I'll ask for the approval of the minutes from the meeting of the Board of Fire Commission held on November 24th, 2020.
So moved. Second.
Do I hear a second? Is there any question on the motion?
I'm actually going to vote against it just because I feel like our minutes need to reflect more of the data and more of the information of the discussions. I think we had talked about that in the past. So just so you know why I'm voting the way I am.
Okay. Any other question to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So moved. The chief's report.
Hello, everybody. It's Chief's report. We'll start with the alarms. And this, again, we'll cover from our last meeting. So 2019, we are at 4,535 alarms. As we stand here at 2020 today, we're at 4,747. It's a difference of 212 alarms, additional alarms, 212. 5 years ago in 2015, we're at 4,105 alarms. So that means that we have an increase of approximately 642 alarms over 5 years ago. Our last Board of Fire Commission meeting was held on November 24th, and the below numbers reflect since that last meeting. So since our last meeting, we provided 7 ALS intercepts, 18 incident responses to the highway. And one thing you're going to hear me start to make mention of is while we're still working with our CAD vendor in an effort to capture the fire or EMS incidents that we were not able to send a fire resource to, our CAD vendor is really good, not the most responsive when it comes to doing things like this. So I'm certain there's not that many of them because we are staffing Engine 9 2 out of 4 shifts right now. But we're not going to be able to provide you that number yet until our CAD vendor is able to get into the system and make that adjustment. But one number you are going to hear me start to make reference of, and I think it's of value, is the number of times that an ambulance responds to an EMS call in North Haven without the assistance of the fire department. And that's in large part because what's happening now is all of the calls for medical emergencies and 911 calls are now going through our dispatch center. And it is being emergency medical dispatch, what we refer to as EMD'd by our dispatchers, to prioritize the call and determine if a fire resource needs to go or not. So those 46 times that just an ambulance responded, it's very difficult to say at this point how many of those times a fire department may have responded, but I can tell you that up until the time that we started providing EMD, our dispatchers, there were a number of those times that we would still send a fire resource because we did not have the ability, our dispatchers did not have the ability in terms of staffing and education to be able to not send a fire resource. So that's 46 potential calls saved the fire department did not have to go to that were appropriately triaged and just an ambulance went to. And I think that's some value in starting to discuss that on a monthly basis. 57% of our calls were EMS related, and of the approximate 344 incidents since our last meeting, 73 of which were overlapping, which brings us to 21% overlapping calls. And that's what I have for alarms. Any questions at all with that?
Chief, just one question regarding the ambulance response, Monroe Fire Department, 46 calls. And if I remember your previous comments, those calls are generally mental health or substance abuse or alcohol related. Is that correct?
So up until recently, yes. Up until the time that we provided EMD, that was always the case. We knew of those calls that had existed, and we knew that by asking a couple of very quick questions, our dispatchers, we were able to not have to send the fire department. But that's not just those calls anymore. Now those are going to capture those calls that we've always discussed and the calls that are taking place predominantly at some of our medical offices in town that do not require the response of a fire department asset. So it's those and then some, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So can I
Any
just
other-
ask, yeah, I just have a quick clarification
Go ahead.
question. So when you do the triage, what are the cases? I know you just sort of spoke a little bit to them, but the cases where a fire resource is not sent.
It's usually incidents where it's at a medical office building with medical care already on scene, and it is a BLS routine transfer call. What I mean by BLS is it is not a life critical incident by any means, and it is typically going to be just a transport to the hospital. It may be abnormal labs, it may be any number of things where a doctor's office or a nursing home feels that they need an ambulance to respond. All the requesting is an ambulance. Our dispatchers intercept that call, make sure that, yes, in fact, all we need to send is an ambulance to this incident, and the fire department does not need to respond. It could be a variety of things.
And one other quick question. So with the PSAR, is the ambulance from North Haven or is it from the contract company or both?
So they're one and the same. The ambulance is a contract company and it's coming from North Haven. So if you look at one of the things that we've moved towards now with the possession of the PSAR is securing 2 ambulances at all times to respond to incidents within North Haven. One of those 2 ambulances are going to that incident.
Okay.
Any other questions of the chief regarding the calls?
No.
Okay. I'll just cover the budget. I wanted to ask
Go
that
ahead,
question.
Jen, did you have a question?
One last one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of calls and Amazon, I know we had talked about this in the past. Do you have a sense of how many calls relate to the Amazon facility, or has that increased the number of calls at all?
It has. I don't have that number. I usually have that number at the workshop, and I'll have it in time for then. And then I'm going to differentiate at that time as well, fire incidents from medical incidents. When the facility first opened, there were some issues with the fire alarm system in that building, so we were responding a lot. That's slowed down now. They've worked out a lot of issues with their alarm system in the building. So now what we see is naturally we're responding to less fire incidents, still some, and more of the medical incidents. But I'll have that number in time for the workshop.
Okay.
So moving to the budget, since our last meeting, we're at 43.9% budget spent as of this time last year. I'm at 47.28% as of this time right now. Since our last meeting, we've collected $3,520 in permit fees, bringing the collected fees this year to $79,892. That is much less. It's worth pointing out that is substantially less than we normally see at this time of year, or normally in excess of $150,000, sometimes $200,000. The building department is seeing the same exact reflection of a decrease in fees. It's due directly to COVID. It's due directly to the fact that construction is not taking place right now in town. We know of a lot of projects that are on the horizon. We're just recently started getting a lot of plans in, so we know that number is going to get back to somewhat of a normal state, but we do need to just point out that that income is far down from what we normally see in the last, I've been doing this now 4 fiscal years, we've been collecting a fire fee, so it's normally much more than that. Regarding the fire marshal's office, at the request of the fire commission, you were provided the month of November, the inspection activity report. I'm not going to cover that this month only because, as I explained when that was requested last month, this covers the month of November. So when we met in the 4th Tuesday in November, I'd already covered most of this information with the exception of 1 week. So moving forward, I will continue to provide that in your agenda each month, and we can cover it in detail. But you can pretty much see this is what I've always been provided every single month, and I would read through the inspections, and I might highlight some of the issues that we're dealing with that particular month. It's also worth just noting that during the month of November, the fire marshal's office was slower than usual because of COVID within the fire department, and there was a good week to 10 days there where there just wasn't staff conducting any inspections. And that's what I have for the fire marshal's office. I have some items for executive session, which we can cover later on in the meeting.
Well, Chief, first of all, thank you for including the inspection activity in our agenda. It was very detailed, and I know moving forward it'll have all of the activity from the last time that this has been produced up until the next meeting. Any questions of the chief regarding his report? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to, yes? Was there a question?
No.
Okay, hearing none, I'll accept the motion to accept the chief's report.
So moved. So ordered.
Do I hear a second? Any
Second.
question on the report? Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Correspondence, chief.
I have no correspondence other than the day-to-day correspondence we receive, and I just want a general thank you to several businesses and residents in town that we're a few days away from Christmas, and they've been more than generous in providing various meals and so forth, dropping off at the station. Just want to reference out in the correspondence and give some thanks to those people that have done so.
Any commissioners receive any correspondence?
No. No.
All right. All right, hearing none, we'll discuss unfinished business for the fire department.
Unfinished business regarding the apparatus. I reference this every month. I just want to reference now that we are moving through our annual preventive maintenance checks of our apparatus. Again, that consists of pump checks and the DOT road checks. No surprises so far, and we're probably about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through our apparatus. And I want to also mention that we've talked numerous times about the age of our apparatus, the overall age of the fleet, particularly when it comes to the engines, the pumpers. It is worth noting that this next fiscal year, I am proposing the purchase of 2 additional fire engines, 2 additional pumpers. The intent being that we would replace our oldest engines in our fleet. The anticipated cost for that would be $300,000 a year, and it would be much like we've done in the past, where it's a lease to own, and those payments would be spread out over 5 years. So it would be $300,000 for 5 years. What I'm looking to do, and you'll hear me reference further in the budget workshop, is we're going to try to keep, essentially what we're going to do is the ladder truck lease is this next fiscal year that we're going into is the last year that we need to pay that payment. It's $211,000. The FCBA lease to purchase, which we also did 5 years ago, and we saved a substantial amount of money, is $80,000. This next fiscal year are the last 2 payments for the $211,000 and the $80,000. What I'm going to propose to the Board of Finance is that we secure the purchase of 2 fire engines next fiscal year. There will be no money due next fiscal year. We basically have to sign a contract to get them built. They're due to arrive roughly 14, 16 months later. By the time the next payment is due, the next fiscal year, that $211,000 and $80,000 that we saved, or that we're not any longer paying, is nearly $300,000, and we can roll that into the payment for the next 5 years for the apparatus. I'm hoping that the Board of Finance looks favorably upon that. If we're able to secure the contract for 2 pumpers and know that we're going to structure the payments in such a way that it's not a significant increase to our current capital line, then we will, for the first time, we will have no apparatus that are over 25 years old.
And the 2 apparatus that we would look to replace are is the 30-year-old, is it, or?
Yeah, it would be, again, it depends a little bit, but
Right.
it would be, we currently have a 26, a 29, and a 33-year-old engines in our fleet. One of those is going to be sold shortly because it's already been replaced. Leaves us with two others, and our intention would be to replace the older engines, obviously, yeah. So more to come on that. I just wanted to give the Board of Fire Commissioners a heads up. We talked about it at our last monthly meeting, and I just want to make sure that you're aware of it.
Chief, can you tell us what the recommendations are for the apparatus and when they should be replaced? I know that some departments have actually, the commissions have done replacement plans for how old they will allow an apparatus to be in the fleet.
Sure. So it varies a lot based on the department in terms of usage, in terms of location, in terms of, what the apparatus is. So what I can tell you is, without getting into all of that, which is, can be a little convoluted in terms of how the department uses this apparatus, I can tell you that Attorney Jennifer Coppola provided correspondence to the Board of Finance, I want to say 3 fiscal years ago during my budget workshop, in which she proposed she talked about some language that had passed at the state. It was a House bill that had passed, and it referenced that fire apparatus should be placed. It referenced a specific standard, NFPA standard, regarding overall apparatus maintenance. If you read that standard, one of the things that's in that NFPA standard is the fact that fire apparatus should not exceed 25 years in age. And I believe it's after 15 years should be placed into a reserve role. But we've never been able to do that here. We routinely have apparatus that are over 25 years old in age. So what I'm looking to do is continue to replace apparatus so that we maintain a fleet that's less than 25 years old. I mean, these apparatus are all frontline apparatus. So it's very difficult to kind of fix it all at once. If you remember last year, I proposed $300,000 in capital to start putting money aside to buy apparatus. As you referenced, there's a lot of departments out there that do that every year. They put money aside. The Board of Finance did not look favorably upon that request. And so we don't have any money put aside for apparatus. And I was really hoping that by this time we'd have our second installment coming up and we'd be able to buy an engine. That's not the case. So I'm going in with kind of plan B right now, which is to structure a lease to own for $300,000, buy 2 engines up front. I'll get into some cost savings and so forth that the town would experience because naturally the cost of this apparatus goes up every year. So no different than we did with the SCBA's. I structured the SCBA payments in such a way that we saved a lot of money by buying it all up front and leasing it over 5 years. We did the same thing with the ladder truck, and I'm hoping we'll do the same thing with 2 engines.
Can we, this is a suggestion to the commission. I know you suggested to the Board of Finance that they start that. It would seem that the Fire Commission could create a recommended plan that we send to the Board of Finance based off of some of the other commissions and how they've done it, to make some suggestions on having a reserve account like you're talking about and figuring out how to fund that. I know there was some correspondence by a local resident who had made some suggestions on ways to be able to save for when we need to replace an apparatus. And it just seems that should be part of the budgeting process in our town, because there have to be replaced and they're big budget items. And I think that's been part of the problem, is that you've got these apparatus that have not been replaced and they're over the age of even what is recommended by the state. So I'm just wondering whether to add sort of to, your recommendations by the commission, doing something in writing to really strongly recommend that the Board of Finance have a reserve fund for apparatus.
Jen, we have done that previously. I don't object to doing it again. I think anything that we collectively could do on a bipartisan basis in the form of a letter to the Board of Finance, recommending, putting monies aside for the purchase of apparatus, I think it would be fine with me. And my expectation is with the rest of the commission. We've done it more than once, and I think we can certainly do it again. I think that we could draft up a letter to that effect. Absolutely.
Okay.
Anything else there, Chief?
No, nothing.
Chief, a question regarding the apparatus that was struck on the highway a month ago or 6 weeks ago?
Yeah. So we've continued to receive quotes for the ladder truck that was involved in an accident by an insured driver, and we're working with the insurance company now to try to get that repaired.
Okay. But that ladder truck is still in operation?
Yeah, it's just cosmetic. There's nothing operational that's wrong with the truck. No.
Okay. Any other questions of the chief regarding the state of apparatus? Discussion of new business for the fire department.
So new business, I have a couple of things listed on your agenda. There's two references to bumping vacation days. The first is for some career firefighters that were unable to use vacation time during 2020. I just want to say something to that effect. The career firefighters are not normally able to carry over vacation days. It's a provision that we're allowing them to do, carry over only 5 days over into 2021. And that's in large part because, as we've talked already about before, we did experience COVID within the fire station, a couple of fire stations, and the staff stepped up. The staff came to work. They canceled vacation time. They covered each other. They covered their shifts. And with that, they sacrificed a lot. And with that, they sacrificed the ability to take some vacation time. So this is something that we have never provided to them in the past. It's a one-time for this next coming year. And it's being done so for obvious reasons because they haven't had the time to use, but also as a way of just saying thank you for stepping up over the last several months and being so accountable to their jobs and coming to work every day. Then the next one I have on for you is just vacation days for two firefighters that were injured and unable to use their time.
Chief, I certainly appreciate our firefighters stepping up, especially during COVID times and giving up their vacation times. I'd like to read a motion. I'm going to ask Commissioner Mulligan to please make the motion after I read it. I'd like to make a motion to accept the carryover of 2020 vacation days due to COVID and injury leave, which equals 42 days in total. So,
You want a
Mary
second
Jane,
on
would you-
that, Pat?
I'd like to make the motion that the chairman has read on the vacation days.
Do I hear it? Okay, Joe, is there any question regarding the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? So moved. Thank you very much.
Last item I have for new business is just looking to make the commission aware there's not a motion necessary, that I have extended the volunteer fire officers' terms that were due to expire the end of 2020. The way that it's normally handled is I would attend, as I often do anyways, but I would attend a monthly meeting with each of the volunteer stations. And while we discuss a lot of matters, one of the things that would be discussed would be their recommendation for officers. We do solicit their recommendations in terms of who they think should be leading each of their departments, each of their stations, and we take that recommendation back to the commission. With the inability for the volunteers to assemble right now due to COVID, I've just decided to extend all of their terms an additional year. None of the captains see any issues with that, and we'll make some decisions, if any are needed, at the end of 2021.
Very
Do you
good.
think it should be voted on, Chief, by the volunteers themselves?
I got through each of the captains, and all of the captains agreed they're not really able to meet and do any kind of vote at this time. So I think with the captains' support, I think we're in good shape.
Okay, moving forward, the good of the fire department.
Go to the department. The only thing I had listed there at the request of the fire commission was just a follow-up to the Board of Selectmen meeting that occurred on December 3rd. And
I'd like to say that what the chief is going to present at this point obviously has been presented to us previously as a commission. And as a result of the Board of Selectmen meeting and the discussion that took place that was very specific to the fire department and the PSAR, I've asked the chief to once again, for the edification of the commission and for the viewing audience, to listen to what the presentation was at the Board of Selectmen meeting. So, Chief, if you will.
Sure. So as you recall, we covered this at a very high level at a fire commission meeting a couple of months ago upon being notified that we received the award of the PSA issued by the state of Connecticut. This gets into significant more detail because it seems like it was being questioned by members of the Board of Selectmen. So again, you can stop me at any point in time, and I apologize if you've already watched a Board of Selectmen meeting. I believe this is all going to be a refresher for the Board of Fire Commissioners, but I want to start with what exactly the PSA is. Remember that it's covered by Connecticut regulation, and there are 3 different levels to the PSA. It stands for primary service area. It essentially covers who can respond as a first responder, who can respond in terms of basic life support, and who can respond in terms of ALS. There are 3 different levels associated to the PSA. They were awarded back in the 1970s, before any of the towns really knew what the PSA would eventually mean moving forward. The town of North Haven secured the PSA as a first responder, and with that allowed its fire department to respond to medical calls. The ALS PSA was unassigned, and the BLS PSA was assigned at that time to, I believe, New Haven Ambulance, which was later bought by American Medical Response, otherwise known as AMR. So AMR has held the BLS PSA for over 30 years. When I was, shortly after I was assigned to be chief of the department in 2015, I pursued the ALS PSA, and we secured that in 2016. Remember that the intent of the PSA originally was to keep ambulances from chasing calls, to keep multiple ambulances from showing up to 911 calls. At that time, remember the way that calls were put out over low-frequency radio channels, and you would have multiple ambulances chasing each other and going to calls. And so the PSA was set up to kind of put some order to the way that medical calls were responded to within the state of Connecticut. The document later served as the legal backing which allowed ambulance companies to operate in specific towns, and that's exactly why AMR held the PSA for the town of North Haven, and no other ambulance company was allowed to operate in North Haven under any condition. So the town of North Haven has not been well served by AMR for a number of years. Having worked for the town for nearly 20 years and being a paramedic myself, I began to learn very early on of inconsistencies which led to poor patient care through the years and misrepresented image that AMR is providing ample service to the taxpayers in North Haven. Specifically, what I found was there's a lack of transparency. Emergency incidents were taking place for which the fire department was never made aware of, and there was no dedicated assets specifically to just the town of North Haven. There are regional assets. The ambulances were sent to a variety of towns in the area. Oftentimes, the ambulance was responding to incidents in North Haven coming from well outside of North Haven. They also did not have the ability to send paramedics to every call, and we often found ourselves having to provide ALS assistance into the hospital because of their inability to staff paramedics. More importantly with that, we had no idea of knowing if there was a paramedic or there wasn't a paramedic coming to the call. Taxpayers in North Haven deserved better. And what do I mean by that? I mean that no matter what happens in North Haven, taxpayers want to know that an ambulance is responding to their need in North Haven. A taxpayer from North Haven shouldn't be concerned with what's taking place in Hamden, what's taking place in New Haven, or other surrounding towns. If an incident is taking place in North Haven at that point in time, it's my belief that the taxpayers in North Haven deserve an ambulance in an appreciable amount of time, within minutes, and it shouldn't be reliant upon what's taking place in surrounding towns. And that's what was happening when you had regional ambulances prior to this.
Chief,
So I want to cover a timeline. Yep,
can I ask a quick question?
sure.
When AMR was the primary responder, when someone called 911, did that call go into dispatch in North Haven? Did you have the ability to know what the call was about and know what was responding, or did that call go directly to AMR? How did that work?
It depends. Yeah, it depends. In some cases, the call would go directly to AMR, and we may never know about it, or if we did, we know about it very late. In other cases, in the majority of cases, our dispatch center was made aware of the incident. And again, two things happen at the same time here. And it wasn't designed that way. But at the same time that we were awarded the PSA, we also implemented a process in dispatch which allowed us to start EMDing the calls again, which I referenced earlier. That was not by design. The two were not supposed to happen at the same time. It's okay that they did, but that wasn't ideal that it happened that way. We had hoped for the PSA to be awarded to us months and months ago, and the EMD side of things for dispatch was just recently something that we're able to do after hiring in January, bringing everybody through training and so forth. So now, while they were always made aware, while they're sometimes made aware of an incident occurring in North Haven, our dispatchers, that is, they couldn't necessarily differentiate what to do with that. They would make us aware of it and we'd have to send resources. Whereas now, we're made aware of every incident. We have to be. Every call has to go to our dispatch. And now our dispatchers are trained and appropriately staffed to be able to determine if a fire resource is needed or not.
So so the ability to triage is not necessarily related to the PSAR, but
Correct.
But it is linked because all the calls are now coming to us where they wouldn't have been before.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yep. So the ability for us to even begin to pursue the PSA started because of a bipartisan legislative review that resulted in a final report being issued in 2014. And I'd encourage you, if you're looking for it, it's called Connecticut Emergency Medical Services Primary Service Area Task Force. And it allowed municipalities a few different avenues to be able to pursue the PSA. Milford was the first town successful in doing so. They're awarded the PSA in 2017. And shortly after, the Fire Commission appointed a new deputy chief, which was Deputy Chief Morris, to oversee EMS and training. I tasked him with oversight of the EMS system in general. I want you to pay attention to a timeline here that I'm going to cover real fast, because this always seems to get discussed at a number of town meetings, and I think it's important that we know this timeline. So in fiscal year 16-17, the fire department provided ALS Intercept to the hospital 310 times during that fiscal year. In fiscal year 17-18, the fire department provided ALS Intercept, again, our paramedic riding into the hospital and assisting, 296 times. With that in mind, when Deputy Chief Martis was appointed, there was anticipated revenue between $200,000 and $275,000 available at that time because of a number of times ALS Intercept was being provided during those two fiscal years and fiscal years prior as well. Those are what we have reference of.
So
It was around, go ahead, yep.
sorry, just a quick question. So is that because you can bill for the transport to the hospital?
It was because we could bill for what happened was we had a bundle billing agreement in place with AMR up until probably 2016. I canceled that bundle billing agreement because we were making only about $20,000 a year. It made no sense. So we canceled the bundle billing agreement and we decided to start billing ourselves. And that's what was going to bring in 200 to 275. That was an independent review that was done by an outside contractor that was put out to bid. And that company came up with how much money we should be able to collect by billing it through our own billing company. And what happened was, it was shortly after fiscal year 17-18, we wrote in 296 times, that we started to put the pressure on AMR, and they started to know that we were going to pursue the PSA. That drove our ALS intercepts down substantially, and with doing so, drove down our anticipated revenue. In fiscal year 18-19, we provided ALS intercept 183 times, and in fiscal year 19-20, 74. So those are the reasons why the revenue was down for those years. It was because AMR started to flood the town of North Haven with paramedic ambulances, regional ambulances, taking them away from other towns because they knew that we were pursuing the PSA. It's the only reason.
And they did, and they,
Sorry,
They did-
can I
they
just
did-
also, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chairman.
oh, no, go ahead, Scott, you go ahead.
I just wanted to also add, we terminated the bundle bill agreement and then attempted to renegotiate it to carve out the Medicare patients, federal payers, from the private insurance, because federal law does not, or not federal law, the CMS, federal regulation, does not allow us to bill for intercept service. AMR, previous leadership, refused to negotiate a bundle bill agreement with us. So we wrote off it. So not only have we done, a third or less than a third of the intercepts that last fiscal year, but of that third, I think we, throughout the course of the 3 years, I think we had to write off something like $140,000 in uncapturable revenue because we couldn't have a bundle bill agreement. And Mr. Frieda and the chief and the chairman, we all had made the collective determination not to send, elderly residents on Medicare an $850 bill. So that's another thing that kind of gets lost. It's not just the number of calls, which is down substantially, but the fact that we could not have a bundle bill agreement with AMR because they wouldn't negotiate. We were losing probably $200 or $300 per call for a large majority of the calls that we were doing.
And just a quick question about how does I understand that you were anticipating revenue, and that's some of the discussion that went on around the deputy chief's position. But the deputy chief's position doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the ALS intercept, does it? Was he hired for that specific purpose, or are they just separate?
No, so it's a good question. He wasn't hired for that purpose. He was hired to oversee EMS and training. And the justification for, even though we had a training officer that had been eliminated from the department for, I want to say 26, 27 years, you're catching me off guard now with the math. Even though we were eliminated that position a long time ago and we were looking to restore it, we tried to find a way to justify the expense in doing so by justifying it with the EMS billing that we'd be able to bring in by having somebody oversee the EMS component of the department. So no, while one doesn't have to do with the other, the Board of Finance continued to tie the two of them together.
Okay, I just wanted to, if they weren't related, I just want to decouple them because regardless of whether the revenue, you've got revenue from other places, so that
exceeded what we were saying, yeah.
Exactly. So I
Right.
think that we need to just make sure that the position was needed regardless for and it had nothing to do with this
100%.
revenue stream. Okay.
Yes, 100%. I just think that what has happened over time is there seems to have been a push to make it sound like somebody was wrong or somebody misspoke or somebody miscalculated. And that wasn't what happened. An independent review provided by an outside company provided those numbers for us. This wasn't me sitting down figuring it out. This wasn't a deputy chief sitting down figuring it out. This was an independent company that did so. And it would have been right, except we started to pursue the PSA and the game changed on us. And as I asked everybody over the last several years to be patient, please be patient. This is not what you're seeing right now is not what's going to happen in the future, because we knew they weren't going to be able to sustain this, whether or not no matter how the PSA turned out. So those numbers were driven down. moving forward, I just want to cover how we got into the PSA. So,
Chief, 1 second. Just related to the previous comments, the deputy chief, the new deputy chief that came on board, Deputy Chief Martis, not only was his role to oversee the EMS component of it, but what continues to be missed is the training component, which is absolutely essential for our volunteers and our paid staff. And that training officer had been excluded, as the chief indicated, for a significant number of years in our from our department. The education and the strides and the safety that has been learned as a result of having a dedicated training officer with consistent training for both paid and volunteer firefighters is just unbelievable. It has been, if you speak to the firefighters themselves, they will absolutely indicate that their training has been superior since Deputy Chief Martis has come on board, and that component of his job has never ever been evaluated and given the credit for what the benefit is to our firefighters. So I wanted to make sure that part of his role and responsibility is not lost in this whole discussion.
Well, and
Go ahead,
I think
Chief.
one other, just to add to that, is I think that's what I was trying to get at. If that position was needed, the fire department tried to offer a solution to how to pay for it, but that position was needed regardless of what happened with the ALS calls. They're not connected. So, I think it was
Absolutely correct.
It was an attempt to try to say, well, we can, we'll be able to generate revenue that will help pay for this position. But if the position is needed, the department shouldn't have to raise the funds. No other departments are asked to do that if the position is needed. So that's what I was kind of trying to get at, which, you just laid out all the reasons why the position is basically needed. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chief. Please
Mr.
continue.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes,
agree
Joe.
with you 100% about the position that Deputy Chief Martis holds. There's been a large improvement in the training and so forth. He's worth his weight in gold as far as I'm concerned, being an ex-volunteer. So I just want to make a note of that.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you, Joe. Chief.
thank you all. So I just want to cover what took place moving forward. So recognizing a number of inconsistencies, I'm not going to get into specific details, but there were specific incidents that we were tracking that we brought to the attention of First Selectman Michael Frieda, and he was at first reluctant to pursue the PSA. And in the end, after a number of incidents were brought to his attention, he decided to allow us to pursue the PSA. So that led to a series of meetings with the First Selectman, Town Attorney, AMR, in which we tried to improve upon the services being provided to North Haven. What happened at that same time was we updated our EMS plan. Our EMS plan is something that's on file. Essentially, every municipality in the state of Connecticut needs to file an EMS plan with the Connecticut Office of Emergency Medical Services. It's a plan that's updated every 5 years, and I tasked Deputy Chief Martis to update our plan in 2017. And with that, he consulted with a number of parties, including AMR, that allowed us to solidify that plan and present it to Office of Emergency Medical Services. That document specifically covered how EMS service is to be provided in the town of North Haven, regardless of who possessed the PSAR. That document provided a critical piece as we began to move forward with the PSA argument. Negotiations with AMR continued throughout 2017, and through calendar year 2018, AMR was closely tracked for compliance in accordance with the 2017 plan that we had implemented. Again, a series of meetings were held. we initially, with town attorney present, had asked AMR directly for the PSAR, and this was held in October, November 2018. That coincides exactly with, if you look back at that timeline I provided, of when we started to see a decline in ALS intercepts. In order to continue to pursue the PSA, we needed to file an alternate plan with the state of Connecticut, what we refer to as an alternate EMS plan, and the initial hearing was held in May of 2019. It concluded in January of 2020, in which North Haven was awarded the PSA. However, AMR filed an appeal to that award. This resulted in a number of hearings. COVID started to take place, and essentially we had to wait 9 months from the time that we were initially provided the award. We had to wait an additional 9 months for the appeal to be awarded to us. And so on September 25th, it was a Friday afternoon, Town North Haven was provided notification that we were awarded a PSA. It was effective immediately. That was a big, we had kind of expected it to come at any point in time. We knew that the state was back open for business and issuing out some declaratory rulings, but to be issued that on a Friday afternoon, we kind of had to put together a quick plan in terms of how we were going to move forward the EMS. So if you read the transcripts from AMR, they were watching our Board of Fire Commission meetings, our Board of Finance meetings, and our Board of Selectmen meetings. I asked over and over again for those meetings to remain somewhat silent on the matter so as not to complicate issues and hearings taking place in Hartford, which is why even in these meetings, we've never really gone into as much detail as we're doing so tonight. But on 9/25, September 25th, the PSA was in the hands of North Haven, and we were responsible for every medical incident occurring in town and every transport coming from North Haven. So we worked out a gentleman's agreement with AMR for 30 days to continue with the service that we had already had in place. We had to do something on a Friday afternoon to keep things moving forward, which essentially left us with about 30 days to decide what to do moving forward. At this point, we reviewed what our options were. Myself, Deputy Chief Martis, and some others reviewed a number of companies that were in the area. It was important that as we began to look at ambulance companies, the proximity of their base of operations is something that became a factor. We want to make sure that we can have administrative meetings. They have their backup ambulances and their workforce and so forth that are all relatively nearby. It's where ambulances go and they experience mechanical failures. We wanted to look at what surrounding towns utilize for service. We wanted to look at what we could have for radio operations in place, meeting locations, and a variety of other reasons. This left really 3 companies for us to consider. If you look at who is being provided in our adjoining towns, left AMR, Nelson, and Hunters. AMR had just finished bringing the town of North Haven through 2 years of court hearings, and had not been able to meet their obligations that we set forth in the EMS plan for that entire period of time. So AMR was not a good option for us moving forward. We were made aware of a pending acquisition by Hartford Hospital to purchase Hunter's Ambulance. And so that took Hunter's Ambulance off the table for us, not knowing what the future of that ambulance company would be. And that allowed us to look at Nelson Ambulance, which is located directly in North Haven. It's a local taxpayer and a local employer. We secured a 3-year contract with Nelson on October 21st, and it was at no expense to the town of North Haven. The transition from AMR to Nelson was announced on our Facebook page, and what it does is it allowed us to have 2 dedicated ambulances in the town of North Haven at all times, 1 ALS and 1 BLS. Again, 24/7 at all times. AMR provided us, dedicated to the town of North Haven, nothing. No ambulances to just North Haven. Performance standards were set at 7 minutes to respond to priority 1 calls, 11 minutes for priority 2 calls. AMR provided us with nothing in terms of response times. We secured direct radio communication with their ambulances and with our public safety answering point, which is our dispatch. This allowed our fire units to communicate directly with responding Nelson ambulances. AMR had provided us with no such communication allowances. We have GIS location of all ambulances for Nelson that are responding to calls in North Haven. AMR refused to allow their GIS to be placed in their ambulances. We have access to patient care reports so that now Deputy Chief Martis, who oversees EMS within a town, North Haven, can view the patient care reports that Nelson is providing and make sure that it meets the terms of our EMS plan and in the terms of what we're looking for patient care to be provided in North Haven. AMR denied us access to that for all that time. And from a financial standpoint, the bundle bill agreement, which Deputy Chief Martis mentioned earlier, we were unable to secure with AMR for Medicare and Medicaid patients. We agreed to build a bundle bill agreement into the contract, and that has since been executed and is in place and is being predated back to when the transition in Nelson took place. So the assignment of the BLS PSARs in North Haven cannot be taken lightly. We're only the second town to successfully be reassigned to PSAR, Milford in 2017, and North Haven present day. We've become the envy of cities and towns throughout the state. Major cities and towns attended our hearings. Dozens have reached out to myself or Deputy Chief Martis, or in some cases the town attorney, to determine how exactly we did it and looking to follow our footsteps. Moving forward, we'll need to ensure that a deputy fire chief remains in place of operations to oversee EMS and all of the EMS response in North Haven. It's my expectation that revenue will begin to pick up. As promised for several years, we alluded to the fact that we knew that things were going to change. It's unfortunate that for some, the revenue is the only thing that matters, but it's something that I at least want to cover because it is important to some people. Again, 2 ambulances assigned in North Haven may sound like a lot, but I can assure you that it's not. It's sufficient and it meets the needs and demands of our town, but it doesn't supplement the fire department's responsibility to provide first responder medical care in ALS, not only the response of ambulances but also to assist with transport of patients. Maybe 6 to 9 months before we have a clear picture and understanding of what the future of EMS in North Haven is going to look like. We have to continue to compile data and put together the mechanisms to do so. I've asked in the past that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance look favorably upon this. I hope the Fire Commission is going to be able to do the same. And again, I know we went into detail, and I apologize if you knew most of this already, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knew what was presented that night.
Thank you, Chief, for that detailed overview and review for us as fire commissioners. Any questions of the chief regarding his comments?
I just have a couple of quick follow-ups. I watched that meeting, and I know there were questions about priority 1 call versus priority 2 call. Can you give some clarification to a couple of quick things? The first is what is a priority 1 versus a priority 2, and what fire resources go out during those calls?
So generally speaking, a priority 1 call is a call that necessitates the needs of lights and siren based on the triage of that call by the dispatchers. So it could be, let's take a shortness of breath or a chest pain or something to that effect, or a code, something that necessitates the need for lights and sirens. And so that's going to prompt the fire department to respond simultaneously with Nelson Ambulance, and it is going to ensure that the ambulance arrives within 7 minutes to that priority 1 call. A priority 2 call would be something that does not necessarily mean that you have to respond with lights and sirens. It's been triaged by the dispatchers to be of less significant in nature. Essentially, there's no reason for responders to put their lives at risk and respond with lights and sirens. The fire department may respond to some calls priority 2, may not. It gets in, again, think about all the things that can cover a medical call. So without getting into details, there's a number of different ways that we may or may not respond. But essentially, again, going back to earlier in the meeting when I talked about the calls that we're not going to, there's going to be times that we do not need to respond. But Nelson is going to be on scene within 11 minutes.
So when, with a priority one, basically, when the fire department sends resources, it's for those calls that through the triage process, you know that you need someone on site to determine clinically what the course of whatever treatment they're going to need. It's not, you're not necessarily going to know how many people and what type of resource until you get there, because you have to evaluate it when you get there.
Well, it may be that, or we've already been able to establish based on the series of questions being asked for that triage process that you need to have the first responding apparatus respond, which is firefighters and paramedics and EMTs, in order to provide enough care on scene. We can't treat every call like only 2 people need to respond from the ambulance. Depending on where the patient is, depending on what's going on, again, a variety of factors, you need more than just a 2 ambulance personnel there.
Right. Okay. That's okay. I get that. And then the other conversation I know that occurred during that selectman meeting was around the increase in the budget for the fire department over the last couple of years. And I just want to spend a few minutes talking about that, because I did a historical look back on the police department budget and the fire department budget. And I know they're not exactly the same, but they're both about public safety for the same town, same size. And, you know, the question has been, why has there been such a recent request for increase? But when you look from 2021 budget to the police department budget in 2007, 2008, their budget, which was $4 million at the time, is now $6 million. And the difference is about $2,620,000. I mean, there's more specific, but it's a little $2 million, about 600. For the fire department, you guys, your budget was only $2 million at the time. It's now increased to, it was $2,800,000. Now it's now $5,600,000. That difference is $2,700,000. So I don't see that the fire department, has had this massive increase when you compare them to the other public safety department in town, because in terms of increase, the total increases, you've both gone up about $2 million, and the police department has started with such a higher level of funding compared to the fire department. So I feel like as a commission, we need to start talking more about that, because that has been such a focus. And I actually went year by year, and there were times where the police department went up 8% and the fire department went up 2%. And then there were other times where it was flipped, because it's based on the need of the department at the time. So I just wanted to bring that up. And when you look at staffing, there's been a lot about staffing, and the police department staffing currently is significantly higher than, not significantly, but they have more staff, and they have different levels in terms of, sergeant, lieutenant, chief, deputy chief. So I just want us to start talking a little bit more about that, because I feel like the conversation has been about the fire department increasing, and really when you compare it to the other public safety department in town, it's really not that different, other than the police department started at a much higher level of funding than the fire department. So I just want to throw that out there for the commissioners and for the chief, just to say that I think, you've been doing some catch up because of how the budgets have happened over time. And it doesn't seem, when you look at the actual numbers, that the difference between the two and the increases between the two are really significantly different.
Jen, your observations are very much appreciated and accurate. We have articulated our concerns throughout the years about having to play catch up. And I think the chief made mention about our apparatus, the age of our apparatus. for many, 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 many years, no money was spent on the North Haven Fire Department, or there's certainly not a lot of money to upgrade. There was no consideration for the economic development that has been taking place in the town and the tremendous influx of business and high-rise buildings and the need for the fire department to staff up and improve their apparatus in order to perform quality customer service. We have made those pleas to the Board of Finance and certainly articulated it to the Board of Selectmen throughout the years. And unfortunately, it has fallen on deaf ears. Except for a couple of different times, and I'm sure you recall, going to a town meeting and residents would step up to the microphone and say, hold on a second, we want another rescue vehicle in town, and we want to underwrite the cost of that new rescue because of the disrepair or the age of that particular apparatus. So I think as we have begun to catch up, I think there are certain persons, and our third select person, well, let's call it like it is. Our third select person at the Board of Selectmen meeting made specific comments regarding the tremendous increase in our budget, and she would be derelict in her duties as an elected official if she didn't focus her attention on what that increase is. And certainly our responsibilities as elected officials specific for the fire department have been voicing that concern to the persons who oversee the purse strings. And we've had difficulty throughout the years. However, I want to say most recently with Mike Frieda's support, we have systematically added additional firefighters. We brought on board new apparatus through some very innovative, creative financing procedures, and the chief made reference to the lease to buy over a 5-year period of time in order not to come up with a significant amount of monies up front that would affect the budget. We looked at a used ladder truck in order to cut back on the cost. I mean, we've been very creative as a commission and as a fire department, and have brought suggestions and recommendations to the keepers of the purse string in order to have them underwrite the cost of the needs of the fire department to deliver quality customer service to the residents, business owners, and visitors of this town that experience emergencies. And we will continue to do that, certainly in our workshops. And I think each of us, as we go through our day-to-day and our activity in town, whether it be at the grocery store or the gas station or talking to our neighbors, we'll talk about the needs of the fire department. And my experience as an elected official fire commissioner is that the residents that I speak to are very favorable of the fire department. They're very appreciative of what the fire department has done on their behalf when they've called into 911 and our personnel comes out to help their family member or their loved one. And I have to say, I was taken back by watching the Board of Selectmen meeting, and not one positive comment came out of the securing of the PSAR by the chief and deputy chief and our town attorney, who did a marvelous job. And when you look at all of the pluses that our town gained, and the chief ticked off what those are, 2 dedicated ambulances in the town of North Haven, one with a paramedic. Response time, 7 to 11 minutes, depending if it's ALS or BLS. A communication network that is able to communicate with our department so that way we know exactly where the ambulance is and what's going on. the GIS system, which is absolutely critical for us to know where the ambulance is coming from. And again, as the chief indicated previously, AMR, an ambulance would come from Milford to a call, or maybe another surrounding area, and it would have taken significant periods of time. Not one comment about appreciation and being pleased about that happening. Patient care reports, so that our deputy chief is able to record what the patient care is in order to communicate with our Yale sponsor hospital that oversees what is going on with the quality care for our residents as we respond to them. And the bundle billing opportunity in order for us to include Medicare and Medicaid, I think is just an unbelievable opportunity to generate revenue for our town. Not one mention of appreciation, job well done. The town attorney, the deputy chief, the chief, the first selectman, in obtaining this, not one word was mentioned. The only thing that was spoken about was, well, what's it going to cost us because, our paramedic is going to have to ride into town, into New Haven on an ambulance, or our rescue is going to take a person into the hospital, and we're not going to have our rescue in town. But what they did not understand is that if we were going to be doing that, there would be 2 ambulances that would be stationed in town in order to cover the slack for us in the event there was an emergency. So, I was just taken back by those comments, and there was one comment that was way off in left field as far as I was concerned, and I really think it was the crux of what wanted to be discussed. And that comment was, did any of the chiefs, whether they be the deputies or our chief, work for Nelson Ambulance? And in my mind, that was so off base and far out in left field. I felt that just smacked of improprieties, backroom deals, and I resent that as the chairman of this commission and an elected official, that question was even asked by our third select woman. That was unconscionable, and it should never have been done. We have senior managers of this department with more than 65 years of senior management experience, major degrees in public safety, advanced degrees in public safety, literally hundreds, if not thousands, of courses that each of them have collectively taken. They're an expert in this field. And where I appreciate the fact, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, I appreciate the fact that our third select woman chooses to investigate about, the fire department. But the truth of the matter is, she's not a firefighter. She's not a senior manager of the fire department, and she does not have the skill or expertise to manage the fire department. And that's exactly what she looks to do. She's looked to do that in the past. And I believe that that's exactly what her mission is at this point, and it's disguised by being educated about the fire department because she is an elected official. Well, each one of us are elected officials, and our specific goal, as I mentioned earlier, and responsibility is to oversee the responsibilities of this fire department. And I think each and every one of us take our responsibilities and our oath very seriously. So I think looking at what was said, and one other comment that really was kind of, I think, really a surprise to me, not knowing that our ladder truck is used for medical calls. And if it is being used as a medical call, even though it cost $1,200,000, it's being used appropriately because we only have 3 apparatus that respond to any emergencies in our town. We have our rescue, we have our water pumper, and we have our ladder truck. And out of two of the shifts, we have one additional pumper over in Montauk. So when the call comes into our dispatch, and it is a non-ALS call or BLS call, yes, the ladder truck is going to be dispatched to that call in order to keep our pumper in place in the event a fire comes in, and certainly to keep our paramedic available in the event there's an ALS call. So that has been discussed numerous times. I believe the third select woman knows that completely. And certainly has a thorough understanding of that, but continues to say that she does not understand it. So I know that she had a concern about the ladder truck and mentioned Commissioner Zuccarelli being in concert with her. I'll leave that up to Commissioner Zuccarelli to respond to that. But I was absolutely taken back that there was no comment of a positive comment. As a matter of fact, the discussion ended by saying, we'll wait 9 more or 6 more months to do a review. A review of what? Of a review of quality customer service that's being delivered to our residents and our business owners and our visitors of our town? What's going to be reviewed? That's my question. So I wanted to make sure that my voice was heard as an elected official as well. And certainly I don't begrudge the third select woman for studying, learning, communicating with whomever she wishes in order to try and educate herself. I think that's wonderful, but it has no bearing on our commission. It has no bearing on our senior managers of our department. We're going to run our department as we see fit.
Can
I'd
I
like to can I make a comment on that meeting as well? I don't know of any time when I would be in complete agreement with the third selectman. And I think that the reason that was given to me as to why there's a ladder truck on medical calls was because of a resident inquiring it of me. And I asked the chief for clarification, which he gave me. And I think we tried to make that clear to the third select woman as to why that happens. I was satisfied with the answer. I passed it on to the resident that asked me the question, and that person seemed to be okay with that. The Marine Corps has a credo that says adapt, improvise, and overcome. And I think that's exactly what the senior management staff of this department has been doing. And Jen, historically, maybe up until the last 6 years, the fire department was not considered to be worthy of administrative attention. Let me put it that way. There was a person who controlled the purse strings as a finance director who everyone knew had problems with this fire department and would poo-poo any request for funds. Now it's time to play catch-up. I mean, we haven't gotten, as you mentioned, the attention we should have gotten, and we're trying to catch up with it now. And that's the town, has to come up with a lot of money to keep us afloat and keep us on the same playing field as the towns and other fire departments. So, I mean, that's where we're at, I think. We're trying to play catch up. And, the equipment is wearing out, and it's going, I hate to use this term, kick the can down the road because everybody uses it, but that applies here, and now the road has come to an end. So, we have to address the needs of this department. I think that, the management staff has done a tremendous job in trying to service the members of this community. I know that the third select woman is also somewhat concerned about the Montauk station and how much money that's going to cost. Well, I think you're going to have to ask the person who was laying on the living room floor looking up if they care about how much it's going to cost. That's a vital service to that area of town, where you can get a response in 5 minutes where it used to take 12. So I don't think that the residents are concerned so much about how much it's going to cost. They pay their taxes. They expect to be served. And I think having that station manned by career guys is vital to that area. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Sounds like a good story.
So I just want to do 2 more comments, and then I'll be quiet. But first, my opinion of what happened at the selectmen meeting, I didn't get the sense that Sally was. I thought a lot of her what she was trying to get at was she didn't understand what the PSAR was, what the implication of it was, and I thought she was really kind of trying to get more information about what it meant. I think I brought up the issue of the budget because she made the comment that the fire department has asked for so many significant increases and other departments haven't. And I just think that that's actually not true when you look at the numbers for the police department versus the fire department. It's just that the fire department has started in a much lower place than the police department did in terms of funding, if you look over the last over 10 years. So, I think that Sally has the right to ask the questions, and that's going to actually help the public to understand how important this is. And I think the chief made a couple of really good points, and specifically was the number of resources that go are not based necessarily on finances. They're based on getting the best clinical results and for medical calls. But we're not only talking medical calls. There are fires, and being in a fire is about the scariest thing that can possibly happen to a resident in town. And I am sure you can ask any resident, they would want the fire department to be able to respond to that call as fast as possible, because you have minutes to get out and not lose your life. So I just think that piece of it was, the chief did a really good job of bringing that to light, is that all of these, the services that the fire department provides, whether they're medical or fire suppression, it's about response time. And that doesn't always, you can't always look at that from a dollar and cents point of view. But again, when you go back and you look at the budgets, even the dollar and cents argument doesn't really fly, that the fire department has been asking for so much more than any other department, because if you do a historic look back, that's not true. So I personally didn't find it offensive that Sally was asking the questions. But I think her idea of coming back in 8 or 9 months and getting just more information about how it's working out is not a bad idea, because that just lets the public know all of the benefits that we're actually seeing from the PSAR, which was, I thought, fairly clear from what the chief presented at that first meeting, or at the selectmen meeting.
The only thing I'll add to your perspective on the budget, Commissioner Caldwell, is while I trust your math, I think we also look at the revenue. Since fiscal year 16-17, we've started to collect revenue. Fiscal year 16-17, we collected almost $150,000 in revenue. 17-18, $1.2 million in revenue. 18-19, just shy of $500,000. And I believe the same for 19-20. I don't have that number in front of me. So I just think it's worth bringing up while you're looking at what the department has increased by. We've also started to collect income, which we never did before either.
Right, and doing that requires the resources to even be able to get the revenue, which is why I was asking so many questions about the fire marshal's office, because in order to get the revenue, you have to pay for the process of getting the revenue. I don't know if I said that very well, but
No, well, you're absolutely correct. Your comments are well taken, and appreciate it, Jen. North Haven has been considered the gold standard by fire departments around the state. Certainly, Milford in 2017 obtained the PSAR, and we, in 2020. And I think, as the chief indicated, and I believe Jeff Denorfio, our town attorney, indicated, numerous towns have reached out to the town attorney and the chief to ask how we went about doing that. And so this is a great thing for the town of North Haven. Having control of the PSA and having some teeth in the agreement, where the chief and the fire department is able to oversee the performance of the ambulance company, and certainly to have an ambulance company that is a local company, local business, hiring residents of this town, committed to delivering quality customer service, adhering to all of the contractual requirements that the chief and the deputy chief and the town attorney laid out. And the town attorney was there to oversee, to make sure that the residents of the town were served correctly in that agreement. He was very articulate, very understanding of the state and federal regulations that were included in that document. And he certainly, he being Jeff Denorfio, was very responsible to make sure that the town was well represented, and all of the T's were crossed and all the I's were dotted on behalf of the residents of this town, and it was done correctly. So on behalf of this commission, Chief and Deputy Chief Martis, thank you for your efforts. Again, it's deeply appreciated because I know it took years in order to accomplish this successful goal. The residents of our town will benefit from this agreement for years to come, and certainly I believe a big thank you needs to go out to all of our fire commissioners for being supportive of this initiative. And in particular, to Michael Frieda, our first selectman, that allowed this to happen. Without his support, we would have never been here to this day, and we would never have been to October 21st when September 25th, when the notification took place. So on behalf of this commission, I want to thank everyone that was involved in the successful obtaining of the PSA for the town of North Haven. Any other questions of the chief regarding his follow-up to the Board of Selectmen? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to move into executive session.
Mr. Chairman, before we go into executive session, Jen brought up something at the beginning of the meeting. I don't know if she wants to elaborate on it or just let it go.
You're talking
That is what, Joe? I'm sorry, what was it, Joe?
Jen wanted to bring something up at the beginning of the meeting, and we never finished whatever she was going to say.
I think we were talking about creating some kind of recommendation. Are you talking about the recommendation to the Board of Finance for a plan for funding apparatus moving forward?
Yeah, I believe that's what you were trying to say, yes.
Yeah, I think the chairman did say we could do something like that. I would be happy to sort of kind of create something and send it to people to look at, and for the chief to look at and edit or something, because I just think it would be helpful if the fire commissioners sent some kind of plan, whether it's an official plan or a letter. And when do you go before the Board of Finance again?
Ended third week in January on a Saturday.
Okay. So will do we have a meeting before then?
I don't think so. I think our meeting's after the presentation. So if you have the time and you like to draft something up, Jen, certainly forward it to me and the chief,
okay,
and we'll take a look at it. That would be fine. Yep, that'll be perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? So
Aye.
moved.
Aye.
So moved.
Five.
I'd like to move back into session for the December 22nd, 2020 North Haven Fire Commission meeting. Commissioner Zuccarelli has a motion to make.
I'd like to make a motion to remove Stephen Gomes from the as a volunteer member of the North Haven Fire Department, effective immediately.
Do I hear a second to the motion?
Second.
Is there any question on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? So moved. I'd like to announce that the next regularly scheduled Board of Fire Commission meeting will be Tuesday, January 26th, 2021 at 6 p.m. I'd like to wish everyone a happy holiday and a happy, healthy new year and good riddance to 2020. And I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So ordered.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Merry Christmas. Happy New
Merry
Year.
Christmas.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.